Guten Tag, WAP. This is Mr. Liniger. Let's make history today as we go over the last video for this unit. We're going to talk about Japan during the early modern period. But let's get started with our daily punishment. My friend's bakery burned down last night. Now his business is toast. Your key terms for today are Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Tokugawa Ieyasu, Shogun, Samurai, Daimyo, Etta, Chonin, Chan Buddhism, Dutch learning, the floating worlds, St. Francis Xavier, Will Adams, Indian Ocean trade. We're going to go over the political civil wars and the beginning of the Tokugawa dynasty, the social structure, changes and continuities in Japan during the early modern period, religious changes in Japan during this time, the effects of European exploration on Japan, and cultural and intellectual life in Japan during the early modern period. Let's start talking about some of the political developments. In the 15th century, Japan was going through a large civil war between rival warring families. This is called the Warring States period. The first person to unite Japan was Nobunaga. He'll depose the Ashiga shogun. He will try to conquer Japan, but he'll be assassinated by one of his vassals, which, if you remember the whole idea of Bushido, that's not a good thing to do. The next person was Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He was one of Nobunaga's generals, but he was a son of a peasant. He wanted to break the hold of the daimyos and the samurai. He'll unite Japan temporarily in 1590. He'll invade Korea, threaten to invade China and the Philippines. But he will die. One of his generals was next. His name was Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was one of Hideyoshi's generals from a minor family. He's going to win the Civil War and establish the Shogunate in the Battle of Sekigahara in 1603. He'll move the capital to Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo. He'll reestablish stability. His big thing was he needed to control the daimyos, the princes, and the powerful locals. Because remember, Japan had like a political feudal system. Each daimyo is going to be able to be absolute lord within his domain, but he's going to require the daimyo to live alternatively in Edo every other year. So like he has power over them. He'll also make them send their children there to kind of keep them hostage. He'll also control the daimyo's marriages, travel expenditures to keep control over them. The daimyos are allowed to rule their land, pay taxes to the shogun, but they're not going to have political power anymore to try to rebel. Let's talk a little bit about their governmental system. The emperor was given an honorary role as the head of the state, but he was really a figurehead. The actual power was held by the shogun. Japan had centralized feudalism. The title of shogun is going to become hereditary within the Tokugawa family. The shogun will be in charge of the courts, finances, appointing officials. He'll be the head of the army. He'll make fiefs, grants of land to the daimyos. Daimyos were land-holding samurai. The daimyos will manage their feudal possessions. The greater samurai will own land, but not much. The lesser samurai will just be warriors. So this shows the top part of the social hierarchy. Once we get below that, it gets a little bit weird. So like, if we're making more generalizations, at the very top you have the samurai, the nobles. The daimyo and shogun were all samurais. And then you have the peasants, then the artisans, then the merchants. Japan took that idea from China, not liking merchants. Then the etta. The etta were outcasts, they were impure people. The members of the classes were not allowed to change their social status. You do have other people like priests and entertainers, which kind of had their own classes. The shogun will enact laws governing hairstyle, dress, and accessories. However, from the 17th to 19th century, there will be changes. The peace will undermine social economic roles of warrior elites. The shogun will put samurai on regular salary, 1 koku per warrior. A koku is an amount of rice. Rice was their currency. You will see the rise of chonin, who are merchants. Cities will become more numerous, populace giving rise to merchants. They were lower ranked members, people in society. They're going to profit from what other people produce, but merchants will start to become a bigger deal in this time. Farmers, there were laws that outlined the duties and conduct of the farmers. Farmers and peasants were not allowed to own weapons. However, as time went on throughout to the 19th century, these class distinctions will start to become blurred. Let's talk about some economic and social changes. Agricultural population production will double between 16 to 1700. The population will rise by 1/3 from 16 to 1700. You'll see an expansion of cities, urbanization. Let's talk about commercial changes. Japan will begin to develop intercoastal shipping. They'll construct well-maintained national roads and bridges. There'll be an increase in crafts, including carpentry, stonemasonry, and lacquer. Japan will trade sporadically with China. They'll get American silver from China. At one time, Japan will have the most silver in the world, along with Spain. Let's talk about some of their cultural beliefs. Neo-Confucianism will be still one of the big belief systems in China. There will be a new belief system called the School of National Learning. They try to establish a distinctive Japanese identity. Shintoism will be emphasized. We talked about Shintoism before. It's the indigenous Japanese religion, kind of animistic. Japanese Buddhism will become more popular, Zen Buddhism. The Tokugawa dynasty will allow some outside learning if they can control it and regulate it. For example, they allowed the printing press to Japan. Another example is the Japanese scholars. Some Japanese scholars were allowed to learn like some of the intellectual ideas from the Dutch learning. European art, medicine, and science will influence some Japanese scholars. The center of the Japanese culture was the floating world. The floating world includes like the culture, urban life of Japan. It includes the tea houses, the theaters, the brothels, the public baths. Poetry, novelist, arts will be encouraged. You have kabuki theater, which is like the theater with the masks, and bunraku, which is like with the puppets, will become very popular in Japan during this time. You have the development of the tea ceremony, which is a huge, it's an actual activity you do where you drink tea, but it's also very ceremonial. You use specific cups. You move your body in certain ways. The Ukiyo School of Art will depict everyday life in Japan in the arts. Christianity, Roman Catholicism will come to Japan. The Dominicans and Franciscans will arrive with the Portuguese. The Jesuits will come later. The most famous Jesuit was St. Francis Xavier. He will help to spread Christianity. They'll convert much of the island in Japan, Kyushu. However, Tokugawa Ieyasu saw Christianity as a threat to the social order. There also will be a famous Englishman called Will Adams. He was an Englishman who shipwrecked in Japan with a Dutch trade mission. He was a gifted linguist. He learned Japan, and he became BFFs with Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was a Protestant, so he hated the Catholics, and he warned them about the Catholic priests and told them how he told the shogun embarrassing things about Catholicism. Like, for example, how the Pope did the Treaty of Tordesillas, so they didn't even consider Japan their own nation. As a result of this, Tokugawa Ieyasu will launch anti-Christian campaign. Many daimyo were in contact with Europeans for weapons. The shogun was afraid that the daimyos getting guns and stuff. The Buddhists and Confucianists resented Christian exclusivity. So after 1612, he's going to ban Christianity from his island. He's going to tell the Catholics they need to renounce their faith. A lot of them did. Those that did not were crucified, which he did ironically. Thousands will go underground and will not be allowed to reappear until 1854, when Japan opens its borders again. Through a period of self-imposed isolation. They saw guns as a threat to the social order. Any peasant could fire a gun, and that would destroy the whole social system. He's going to control contacts with the foreigners. He's going to ban the Japanese from foreign contacts. He'll adopt a period of isolation from the 1630s all the way till 1854. Foreign trade will be under tight restriction. Only one Dutch ship could come to Nagasaki once a year. So one European ship once a year. Despite this, Japan will never be fully isolated. Lastly, let's talk about some of their changes over time in Asia. Portugal, the Portuguese Indian Ocean empires will decline. They still have, they lose Southeast Asia to the Dutch. They lose India to England. Spain has the Philippines, but that's about all. The Dutch will have Java. The English will have India. The Dutch capture Malacca, so they'll control this, the Indies and Indonesia, which is Indonesia, and the spice trade. They'll follow the Portuguese model of port factory system. They'll monopolize the spice trade. They'll establish plantations in Java. They'll transplant crops there. Spice is coffee. The island Java, one of the synonyms for coffee is actually called Java. They get that because so much coffee was grown there. The English will lose the battle for the spice trade in Java, but the English will take control over India. They'll make alliances with local princes against the Mughals, who resented a lot of the local princes resented the Mughals because they were not religiously tolerant under Aurangzeb. In India, they'll concentrate on controlling the islands where their naval advantage will help them. The Dutch will conquer Ceylon, Java, the East Indies. The Spanish will conquer the Philippine Islands. The English at first conquered the little port towns on the coast of India before they start conquering all of India. At first, the European countries will be content to let the Asians retain their old systems, traditions, provided they provided tribute. But as we get to the next unit, a lot of these lands will be taken over directly. The Portuguese and the Spanish will introduce Catholicism, missionaries. The Dutch and English really did not care about converting people. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. That is all of Unit 2. We'll be starting Unit 3 next. Done with the early modern period. Until next time, deuces. Deuces.